Yay.
We live in a world that evolves around deadlines and due dates. If you have a flight that is supposed to take off 2:15 and the door closes 2 o'clock, if you show up 2:01, chances are the door is closed, you won't be able to get on. If you have to pay a certain bill by the end of the month and you paid it after 11:59 p.m., you might be hit with a late fee. If you have to submit a paper, submit a project, if you're late, it might not be accepted. So the world is really evolves around due dates and deadlines, and in a way, it has to be that way. If there won't be any deadlines, if there won't be any cutoff points, then people will just drag out, and we'll all be waiting to submit our first paper in school because we don't have any deadlines. In the Torah, we also have this concept of deadlines. That's something that has a specific time for it to happen, a specific date for it to be done. That's the time to do it. If that date is missing, if that date misses, the mitzvah is missed. You can do it again the next time the time comes around, but you can't really ever fulfill that date. If someone didn't shake the lulav and etrog in the first day of Sukkot or during Sukkot, then he lost that mitzvah. The next year he could do it, but for that year he lost that mitzvah. And here we're saying that, and here this idea is true also regarding the sacrifices, the time of the temple and the tabernacle, the time that we learn about it in the parshas. There were sacrifices that were given on different days. There were a daily sacrifice. There were sacrifices that had a set date. There were weekly, and then certain sacrifices that were offered during the holidays, the Yom Tovim. Every sacrifice had its set date, its designated time. And the Torah tells us that you should offer each sacrifice in its time, during its time. And this teaches us if the time passed, you lost your chance. Right? So everything has a time, a time frame that it has to be done in, and it's pretty much confined to that time frame. If we miss it, then the mitzvah cannot be done. It can be done the next time that kind of time comes around, but the same mitzvah can't really be made up. Now, that's the rule. In this week's Torah portion, we have a story, very famous story, which really is flowing against the current. It breaks this rule. Let's see the story together. Right. The Torah is describing what happened the second year the Jews were in the desert during the first month, in the beginning of the first month, where Hashem commanded the Jewish nation that they should bring the Passover sacrifice. At this point, they have brought the Passover sacrifice once. They brought it the first year, the year that they left Egypt. Now the second year came, and Hashem commanded them, Passover is coming, that time of year is coming, bring this Passover sacrifice. Now, so the Jews went and they brought the Passover sacrifice during the holiday of Passover. However, the Torah tells us, number one, there were men who were ritually unclean because of contact with a dead person, and therefore cannot make the Passover sacrifice on that day. The law is that a person which, in order to bring and to eat from a sacrifice, you have to be pure. Pure in this sense means that the person did not become in contact with anything that would make him spiritually, ritually impure. The things that he might contact that will make him impure is a dead body, dead person, or certain insects, certain animals. There's a list of things in the Torah which things make a person impure. In our case, what made these people unclean, impure, was the contact with a dead body, with a dead person. Who did they contact? Before you move on in the story, why were they impure? Where did they come across a dead person in the desert? All the Jews, they just left Egypt around a year earlier. Who were they? Which dead person did they come in contact with?
Rebbe, I always had a question.
Sure.
It's 2 years.
Yeah.
It's 2 million people in 2 years. This was not Tchias HaMesim. People were living ordinary lives. Why do we think that nobody died along the way? You had people from children to elderly people. These were not all teenagers. In the normal course of events, people should die. I know you're getting to Yosef HaTzadik, but my question always was, why did he have to be the only reason that nobody died? That's all. I'm sorry.
Right. So,
but it's not 2 years. It's only a year and a month.
So let me.
2-3 million people. Just from the flu, you have people dying.
Right. So the
It's
answer,
realistic not to have people die.
could be, the truth is, when I was preparing the class, that thought passed through my mind. Why we're looking for who are the special people. In other words, we're looking for where did they become unclean? Why can't we just
Do you get unclean from a dead animal?
right? So the one answer is because the numbers in the Torah, from the numbers, there are two countings of the Jewish nation, right? The Torah tells us one at the beginning of the year and one around this time. So if you compare the numbers, it would follow that no one really passed away during these 6 months. It could be it was a special miracle. After all, they were supposed to enter Israel, but there's definitely opinions that hold that no one passed away in those 6 months. So therefore, we're searching, where did they become unclean? Where did they become impure? Which that person did they contact? So that would be one reason why we're trying to figure out who did they get in contact with. So the Gemara, the Talmud discusses this, that these people, it seems like they were distinguished people, because usually when the Torah uses the term anoshim, it's a term of some people that have certain status. And the Torah, the Talmud gives a few opinions. One opinion was that there were people that were carrying Joseph's bones, which was just mentioned. Joseph commanded the Jewish nation that they should bring his bones to Israel. He shouldn't be buried in Egypt. And they listened. Moshe is the one that originally was occupied with making sure his bones get out of Egypt, but then there were people that carried them. Carrying bones is carrying the coffin is counted being in contact with a dead body. Another opinion was that Nadav and Avihu, the sons of Aaron, just passed away, and they were the people that took care of burying Aaron's sons, children that just passed away on the day that the tabernacle was inaugurated. So whatever the case is, the point is that the point is that they were doing something important, meaning they were doing a mitzvah. They weren't just random people they became impure from something, from whatever way, from being negligent. They were doing a mitzvah, they're doing something right. Okay, so whatever the case is, there are these people that were doing a mitzvah and they became impure, and now they can't bring the Passover sacrifice in its right time, because you have to be pure. So let's continue the story. Right, so there were men that were, so they approached Moses and Aaron on that day, and those men said to him, "We are ritually unclean because of contact with a dead person. But why should we be excluded so as not to bring the offering of the Lord in its appointed time with all the children of Israel? The rest of the Jewish nation is bringing this sacrifice. Why can't we join? Why should we be excluded? Why should we miss out?" That was the request. That was the question. So Moses said to them, "Wait, and I will hear what the Lord instructs concerning you." Now, the fact that they had a question itself should make us have a question. What were they thinking? What were they thinking? We just said how everything has a deadline, everything has a time frame. And yes, sometimes we miss the deadline for very good reasons. Sometimes it's something that's not in our control. But at the end of the day, you missed it. So here also, they're asking, why should we be excluded? Why should we be excluded? Why shouldn't you be excluded? You said it yourself, you're impure. Let's see how one of the commentaries says this question in such a powerful way. The Orach Chaim, Rabbi Chaim Ibn Attar, he writes, "One needs to know the claim of the people in their statement, why should we be diminished? Why should we miss out? Is the reason not answered by their own mouths? We are impure. And what do they want given to them? A new Torah? They want new law? Yeah, they were impure. That's why they couldn't bring it. They answered their own question. So why are they saying, why should we be excluded? Why? You said the reason why you should be excluded. And Moses doesn't, what should Moshe answer? What should Moses respond? Why should we be excluded? You know why? Because you're impure. But Moses didn't say that. Moses says, "Oh, let me find out. This is an interesting question. Let me ask Hashem." Now, what does Hashem say? So we would expect Hashem would say, "Yeah, it's unfortunate. You're not able to do it, but you're doing a different mitzvah. Now you're not able to bring this mitzvah. Now you have to fulfill this mitzvah." But that's not what Hashem says. Hashem says, "I'm making an exception to the rule. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, any person," the second paragraph in number 1, "who becomes unclean from contact with the dead or is on a distant journey, he's far away from the temple, whether among you or in future generations, he shall make a Passover sacrifice for the Lord. In the second month, on the 14th day, in the afternoon, they should make it. They should eat unleavened cakes, the matzah, and bitter herbs." Right? So you missed out the first month. Someone was unclean, he was tummy, impure, or he was on a faraway journey. He wasn't close enough. He wasn't close enough to bring the sacrifice. So then he has a second chance. He's able to bring the karban on the second month of year. He's able to bring it a month later if he missed out. And what's interesting is they were people that had a very good reason why they didn't bring the sacrifice. Like we said, they were unclean. They were doing something necessary. They're carrying the bones of Joseph. They helped out in the burial of Nadav and Avihu that passed away suddenly. So they're doing something very positive, very important. And nevertheless, they requested. Okay, we have to understand what the request was, but they requested, and Hashem said, "Okay, I'll make an exception to the rule. Usually you miss, it's over. Here, you can make it up a month later." But now, when Hashem says you can make up the Passover sacrifice, he broadens the people that could make up the second Passover sacrifice. Not only he says people that were impure for a very necessary reason, anyone that was impure, and anyone that was on a faraway journey that just wasn't there. Hashem could say, make sure to be in the right place in the right time. If you're far away, start walking a little earlier, start traveling earlier. No, you're far away. You're far from Jerusalem. Okay, you'll make it the second month. You could make it a month later. More than that, the halacha is the rabbis tell us that even someone who intentionally didn't bring the sacrifice, the Passover sacrifice, during the first month, intentionally, deliberately, he could still make it up the second month. Right? Maimonides, in his book where he writes the halachas of all the laws of the Torah, the Mishnah Torah, he says very clearly, that's how he rules, that if someone deliberately didn't bring the sacrifice on the first month, during the first month, the first Passover, he can make up on the second Passover. And here, again, the question is, why is Hashem broadening the...
Rabbi, I don't know if you see the hands, that's why I've been holding the hand. I wanted to make a comment. I wanted to say, maybe because of the importance of eating meat. When you do a korban, you eat the meat.
Yeah.
Some of the korban. And we know they complained that later that they want meat. So maybe because they're constantly eating the manna, they don't want to miss out on eating meat on Pesach, on the korban. So they're asking for a special thing.
But it seems like from the verse that they were more concerned with they say, why should we miss out from offering the sacrifice of Hashem on this day? Seems like they were more concerned about missing out the spiritual sacrifice and the spiritual connection with Hashem than just eating the meat, right?
Well, I didn't say that it's the only reason, but...
You're right. It could be that's not the only reason, but it seems like they also felt that they're missing out on they could kill an animal in the backyard and eat it also, right? They don't have to bring it as a sacrifice. So here we have to understand, another question?
Isn't this pretty unusual, this circumstance, that Hashem makes a change or an exception, or this is very unusual, isn't it?
100%. That's exactly what
we're
trying to figure out. Why is Hashem making such an exception to the rule? Such a huge exception?
Yes. I don't know.
Must be something big going on.
The daughters of Tzlofchad was also a big change. So
yes,
it's not the only time.
Right. So maybe we'll need one explanation that will fit both.
Okay.
We might find a common denominator in both of these cases. All right. Any other questions? All right, so we'll continue. So here we have to understand, on the one hand, if Hashem wants that there should be a second chance here, let him say it right away. Why is he waiting for the people to come forth? And if he doesn't want a second chance here, after the people came forth, why should he give in to them? Why should he say, okay, we'll make a second Passover for those that missed it? And especially when he says we're making a second Passover for those who missed it, he broadens it, even someone that intentionally missed it, even someone that was far away. He broadens the spectrum of people that could be included in the second Passover. So, like most questions, the commentaries, the classical commentaries speak about it. So here also, we'll share a few ideas, and then we'll see an idea that the Rebbe once spoke about. But actually, the idea that we're going to speak about is something that he spoke about many times in different occasions, and especially on the day of the second Passover, he discussed the idea that we're going to say later.
Can I take another second?
Sure.
I think another reason could be because God, Yetziat Mitzrayim was a very important thing to him, and he wanted us to celebrate it. And we constantly say, we constantly remind ourselves that we got out of Egypt, that Hashem took us out of Egypt, that Hashem took us out of Egypt. So everybody should celebrate that holiday and not miss.
So
He
that's
wouldn't make it for another holiday, but he would make it for that holiday, the exception.
right. So that's actually a very good point, and we're actually single to bring that from the Chinuch. One of the
okay.
commentaries say that idea. Yeah, thank you very much. We'll get to that in a moment. So the Or HaChaim, Chaim Ibn Attar that we mentioned earlier, that he asked the question, what were they thinking? Do they want a new Torah? They answered their question themselves. They said that they were impure. So he says, you know what they were asking? They were saying the following. The reason why we're impure is because we're doing a mitzvah. We're doing something positive. We're doing something good. We're taking care of we're carrying the bones of Joseph. We were burying Nadav and Avihu, like we said earlier, passed away suddenly. We're doing something positive. We're doing something that's important. So therefore, we shouldn't miss out on this mitzvah. And they're essentially asking Hashem should view them as if they weren't impure. Make an exception to the rule because we're impure for a positive reason, for a good reason. That's his idea. That's the idea that he develops, that he presents and develops, that they wanted an exception to the rule because they were impure for a proper reason. This reason falls short from explaining, if that's the case, why does Hashem broaden the people that could bring the second Passover, even for people that weren't impure because of a mitzvah, even people that intentionally didn't bring the second Passover? So if that's the case, if what they're asking is only because to make an exception to the rule because they were doing the mitzvah, so then the exception should be only for people that are doing the mitzvah, not for everyone. Right? So we're still back to the drawing board to look for another explanation to what makes this mitzvah different. Yeah.
My question is, if that's your point, that they would look there for the exception, that to overlook the Tumah, then why didn't they come the first time? They should have come before Pesach. When Moshe said, everybody prepare Pesach, only the people that are Tahar can do the Pesach, then you stand up and say, excuse me, I want an exception for this Taurus rule. But
Right,
they didn't do that.
So the truth is, are you assuming that they asked only after Passover, not before Passover?
Lummi, I don't know. You're right.
Right. So actually,
it could have been before the first Yom Tov.
So what's interesting is in the verse, it says that Hashem told that the Jews made the Passover on the 14th of Nisan, and then it says there's people that are impure, and they came by Yomahu on that day. That day. So it seems like they came on the 14th. That's what it seemed like. And it seems like there are many commentaries that actually do say that it was that exact day that they came by Yomahu that day. Okay. So that would.
Shkoyach.
Yeah. So there's another idea, which I mentioned earlier, which the Chinuch says the following. The mitzvah number 4. He says the commandment of Passover is a very, very central commandment. And is one of, it's obviously hard to measure which commandments are the most important, but it's definitely definitely up there on the list. And he explains why. Because the commandment of the Pesach offering is powerful and a clear sign to all the creation of the world. For at the time of the Exodus, God performed great miracles and wonders for us and changed the nature of the world in the eyes of many nations. And so all the peoples of the earth saw that his providence and power is over the lower earthly beings. The time of Passover was a very special time. It's a time where Hashem performed miracles. He took a nation from within another nation, something that was definitely extremely unique. No, a slave was not able to run away from Egypt. It was almost a one large prison, and he took the Jews, he took a nation from within another nation, and he didn't just take them out. He performed miracles for them. He did 10 plagues. The leaving was a miracle, and it wasn't sometimes there are things that happen locally. This was something that was global news. Everyone knew about it. The nations met, in the eyes of many nations, they recognized the greatness of Hashem and how Hashem performed miracles. And since this is such an important time in history, and we commemorate that time every year, which is really the time that our belief in Hashem is established and strengthened. So since this is such an important holiday, therefore it was his will to allow every man of Israel to merit in this important commandment, and that an accident of long distance not impede him from fulfilling it. Right? No matter what situation he's in, he should be able to fulfill this commandment, which is such a central and important commandment. Rather, if trouble occurred to him and he's prevented in the first month and he did not do it with the earlier ones, he may do so in the second month. Since this is such an important and central commandment, therefore Hashem said, we'll give you a second chance. This is a commandment that deserves a second chance. It's a commandment where we, like we said earlier, with the belief in Hashem, belief that Hashem has the ultimate power over nature, over what's happening, is strengthened. That's what the holiday is all about. That's the theme of the Yom Tov, of the holiday of Passover. So therefore, you didn't bring it the first month, you can make it up a second. Here, and that's why Hashem really extended the leeway, the opportunity to make up the second month, because he wanted everyone to be included. Not only someone that was involved in a mitzvah, not only someone that was involved in something good, but even someone that maybe he could have brought it. He was just lazy, or he was far away. He didn't put in the effort to be in the right place in the right time. They also can make it up. Now, the question here would be on the other side. If that's the case, why didn't Hashem incorporate in the commandment the idea that there's a second chance? Why did he wait for people to request? Why did he wait for people to come forth, to complain, to plead? He should have just said, okay, there's the first Passover. Whoever can't do it should do it the second Passover. He didn't do that. He waited for people to request. He waited for people to ask. Why? Why didn't? If it's so important, and therefore he wants to give a second chance, give it right away. Incorporate that in the original giving of the commandment. So we're really back to this question. On the one hand, we see an exception to the rule that we're able to make up. On the other hand, we see specifically after people requested. But on the other hand, anyone that wants is able to make up, as long as they bring the second Passover. So what's really going on here? Any questions or thoughts before we move on?
Well, I would think that this is given in the desert. They did the Passover first. They started right away in the desert. So
right.
Most people didn't have a reason to miss it. They were all together in the same camp. I don't know how far they can go in a camp.
Right.
They don't have business outside the camp. So the only ones that had a reason was the ones that were tamei from dead bodies. But the bigger question is what will happen in Israel when they'll be far from Jerusalem.
Right.
And that's where the easement is really needed.
Right, and Hashem added that, right? When he responded, he said, also people that are far away.
Yeah.
And more than that, even someone that deliberately didn't bring the Passover sacrifice, that's also included.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think something, there's something, a phrase, he changed the nature of the world in the eyes of many nations. I think that's critical, that he showed that he has compassion, and he wants the people to do what he says, but he's willing to bend a little bit. And it changing the nature of the world in the eyes of many nations. That's amazing.
So you're right. So you're saying just like he changed the nature of the world by the Passover, he also changed the rules a little.
Yes.
That's a very interesting observation.
Well,
So
that's how I see it.
Right. Right. That's an interesting observation. So you have like that parallel. Like the idea of the holiday is we're celebrating that Hashem changed the nature of the world, and now he's also changing the rules. Interesting. Before we answer the question that we're presenting here, what really happened? Why really are we changing the rules here? Why after they requested? There's one more point that is interesting to note. When did this story happen? This story happened the second year of when the Jews left Egypt. So it's really the beginning of and it happened the beginning of the second year, the first month of the second year. We spoke in the past about the counting of the Jews, how the Jews were counted in the beginning of this book, of the book of Numbers. When did that take place? That took place, the Torah tells us, that happened in the beginning of the second month of the second year, right? In the beginning of the second month of the second year. So really the beginning of the book of Numbers discusses the story or the episode that happened on the second month of the second year. And here we're really going back. So even though quite a few chapters later, almost 9-10 chapters later, the Torah goes back and says, oh, I'm going to tell you something that happened a month earlier, that Hashem commanded them to bring the Passover sacrifice, and their people are impure, right? The whole story that we just related. So really the Torah is a little out of order. So Rashi comments, oh, this teaches us a general rule that in the Torah, sometimes stories are presented out of order. Right? We have that rule is used, that sometimes stories that are related later are really happened earlier, which are related earlier, really happened later. Because the Torah is not a storybook. The Torah is not just telling us the history. The Torah is teaching us lessons, and therefore it arranges the order of the stories based on the lessons that it's trying to convey. And now, where does the Torah teach us this? Where's one of the most clearest places where we see that something is out of order? Is in this story, right? Because it's clear. The Torah says that happened the second month of the first year. The counting happened the second month of the first year. And 9 chapters later, it tells you, Hashem spoke to Moshe to bring the Passover in the beginning of the first month of the second year, right? The second month of the second year and the first month of the second year. So it's clear. It's clear that's out of order. And from here, we learn a general rule that sometimes stories are out of order. Now, the Rebbe comments, there's a reason why the Torah is teaching me this rule over here. Because what's the whole theme of this story? The whole theme of the story is that sometimes things are out of order. Sometimes the order tells us you missed. The order says you passed the deadline. And they requested, and Hashem said, yes, you could bring this a month later. That's the idea of this story, how they're able to make up something they missed, which is technically something that is out of order. Out of order of what? Out of the order that the Torah usually has. Out of the rule that the Torah usually has, that you have a chance to do something, do it in that time. If you don't do it, you missed out. So again, this general concept that sometimes that the Torah is not relating things in a chronological order is also is taught to us by a story that is also out of the order, right? That's the thought that the Rebbe develops, and he says to further summarize what's the idea of the uniqueness of the second Passover. Rabbi Yosef Yitzchok Schneerson, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, passed away in 1950. He said he put it this way: number 3, the theme of the second Passover, that is never too late. It is always possible to put things right, even if one is ritually impure or one was far away, and even in the case when his impurity was deliberate. Nonetheless, he can correct it. Right? That's the theme of the second Passover. He coined it and he put it in this phrase, phrased it in this way: that no matter what, it's never too late. Too late from what? Too late from the order that the Torah gives. Right? There's always a chance to make it.
The door is always open.
Yeah. Thank you. So what really happened there? What really happened here was that people came and complained and said, why should we miss out? Yes, there's rules. There's rules, there's regulations, there's deadlines, and there's timelines, and there's dates that we're supposed to do certain things. But here people came and they came with a broken heart, and they cried out, why should we miss out? And when they did that, that's stronger than everything. Yes, there's rules. Everywhere else we say if you don't do the mitzvah in its proper time, you missed it. But what happened unique here? What happened unique here is that people screamed, that people cried out from the depth of their heart. Why should we miss out? Why should we be excluded? Yes, the rules are against them, right? If they would think, is it logical for us to cry out, why should we miss out? They probably will come to the conclusion that it's not. It's not. Just like someone who, if we miss a deadline from paying a bill, we embrace the idea that we're going to have to pay a late fee. We don't call and start screaming, because we knew in advance that this is the date, this is the deadline, and we will pay the late fee. And next time we'll try to make sure we're there on time, even if it's something that wasn't in our control. Okay, sometimes they waive the fee, depending on the company, how nice they are. But this idea that the rule was that they missed out, they knew that. But they didn't come with a logical discussion or argument, because then the Orach Chaim is 100% right. What were they thinking? They answered their own question. We were impure, therefore we can't bring it. So what did they do here? The key here is that they came and they screamed. And they cried to Moshe, why should we miss out? And that is stronger than everything. You messed up, you missed. Yeah, seemingly it's over. But when there's a cry that comes and says, I understand I did something wrong, but I want to fix it, that cry is stronger than everything. And this idea, the strength of a cry is a very powerful idea that we find time and time again in the Torah, how strong the cry is, and sometimes even something which seemingly maybe doesn't fit the pattern of things. But if there's a cry involved, that's stronger than everything. Just one case. We all know this story that's related in the beginning of the Torah of Sodom and Amorah, which were turned over because they weren't, the Torah tells us, because they did not support and they didn't give charity, they were very stingy, and they didn't help out and support poor people. Right? That was one of the main sins that they did. And the obvious question is, while charity is for sure something which is important, but we don't find that Hashem commanded Noah and his descendants to give charity. Yes, it's a important thing to do. It's a nice thing to do, and it's a reasonable thing to do. But they weren't commanded to do it. In the Torah, there's a commandment to Jews to give charity, but we don't find that he commanded the descendants of Noah to give charity. So why were they turned over? What's so wrong?
Death.
What?
On pain of death. It's not just give charity. If you don't give charity, you're chayav misa. You're going to be killed. That never happened, for sure.
Right. So you're strengthening the question.
Yes.
Right.
Sometimes I'm here to help you too.
Yeah. So the Torah says that. So if we look in the Torah, when the Torah describes the sin of Sodom and Amorah, the Torah says, Hashem says, let me go down and see if like the cry that's coming forth to me is true, and if it's accurate, then they're going to the end of them. They're going to be turned over and destroyed. The cry, right? Meaning it could be there was something. It could be they had an excuse. However, the fact that the Talmud describes in left how they ignored people's cries. They should have heeded, they should have listened into a cry. When they heard the cry of the people that weren't, that needed help and needed support, and they didn't listen, that's the end. There's a certain power that a cry has that goes above and beyond the rules. And in this case, they didn't listen to the cry. That was the problem, right? The Torah uses that term, the cry that's coming to me from the city, the cry that's coming from the city. They didn't listen to the cry. Another story, which is related in the Talmud, is the story of Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Dudaya. I wanted to add into the source sheets, but I forgot to. So when we say someone was a Rabbi Eliezer ben Dudaya, you think we're dealing here with someone righteous, someone that studied Torah, someone that's quoted a lot in the Talmud, like many rabbis that are mentioned in the Talmud that they quoted a lot. And here the case is just the opposite. He's a gangster. He really didn't follow any rules his whole life. At some point, someone told him, you're a lost case. Look, your whole life didn't follow any rules. You're sinning. You're over. And that sort of shook him up. And right away, he realized that shook him up, and he's like, I better change. And he started to scream, the heavens should request mercy for me. Well, the heavens, no answer. The earth, the mountains, everyone ignored his call. When he realized he's really lost, he put his head between he put his head down and he cried until he passed away. Right? It says he passed away from crying. When he passed away, a heavenly voice came out and said that Rabbi Eliezer ben Dudaya has a share in the world to come. And we even find that the great sage, which sage was it? Rabbi Yehudah Nasi said, when he heard this story, he said that he started to cry. He was very emotional and said, there's certain people that they buy their share in the world to come in 1 hour. 1 hour. So what really happened in the story? What really happened was somehow the message got through to him that he needs to change his ways. So right away he started to cry. Let the heavens, the earth. And the commentaries explain what he was really saying. He was really looking for excuses. the heaven, the he was referring to maybe his ancestor, the family he grew up in, his surroundings. That's what he was referring to when he said the heaven and the earth should request mercy on me. The mountains, which in different places we use the heaven, the earth, the mountains as a metaphor for maybe someone's family or someone's surrounding. And they didn't answer because that's not the way to go about it. So when he realized that's not the way, he realized, I have to do something. And he realized that it has to come from within. And when he realized that, he broke down until he passed away. Right? That's what happened in the story. He cried until the last energy that he had. And with that powerful crying, what happened? He turned over his whole life. His whole life was turned over from that cry that came from the depth of his soul, which really tells us that, shows the power of this cry and the scream, that on the one hand, he totally went against all the rules. In a certain sense, he really re-experienced, or he did again exactly what the people did by the desert, and the desert did many years earlier by the second Passover. He cried out, yes, I did something, I wasn't the way I was supposed to my whole life. And he regretted from the depth of his heart. And therefore, with that deep cry, he really changed over his life. And that's what Rebbe said. This is someone that changed over the life with a cry. With what? With the power of a cry, with the power of that plea and that regret that he had. So in his case, it was a case of a cry that was a regretful cry. In our story, it wasn't a regretful cry, but it was a cry, why should we miss out? But the common denominator is that it was a cry, and that cry, that deep request, that even though we're in a situation that we maybe should miss out, but why? We don't want to miss out. So that has the power that actually Hashem should say, you know what, I'm going to give you a chance, a second chance. And really, so in the story of Passover, by the Passover sacrifice, we have a second chance, literally, to do the mitzvah again. But this idea is really by all commandments. The power that we have of teshuvah, the power that we have that when we regret from the depth of our heart of something that we missed or something that we did wrong, Hashem fills us in. And that's really the key here. The key of the story is that the people stepped forward and they said, we don't want to miss out. And they cried that we don't want to miss out. Why should we be excluded? They came with a strong complaint, a strong outcry. And what did Hashem do? Hashem said, 100%, you're not going to miss out. We'll give you a second chance. And that's really a very powerful lesson. And really, there's two lessons here. One lesson is the power of a cry. We should always listen to hear someone's, when we hear someone cry, we should listen. And sometimes when we hear someone cry, we right away start making we start thinking, I'm right. Who said they're right? Who said maybe they put themselves in that situation, they did it to themselves. But we see here, no, that when someone is crying, when there's that cry, we should disregard the rules. And we should realize that it's time to accept and time to listen. And then there's the other lesson, which is that the other lesson, which is that when we make a decision and we step forward that we want to fix what we missed, Hashem will help us. We should help us out and help us fix what we missed and fulfill what we were lacking. Just like in the story of the people that missed the first Passover. Any questions or comments?
Yes, I'd like to share with you an experience I had relative to this subject. Is that when I was 50, through a series of events, I decided to convert. And I started the process, and during that process, the beginning, somebody in the community invited me to a Pesach to go along, to the meal. And I was only used to Reform one. This is a Reform that time. And we went along, and I'd never been to an Orthodox one before, and the man asked the rabbi whether he could invite me because I was a Gentile. And he said, yes, as long as you don't ask questions. So I didn't ask questions. And as it went on, the meal went on, I had when we got to eating the matzah, I had intense experience of the slavery, what it was spiritually. And it really shook me up. And as it went by, I sort of just thought, okay, that was whatever that was. It didn't occur again. And even when I became Jewish, it didn't occur again. And I told a rabbi about this particular experience in Israel, and he said, what is your birth date? So I said, do you mean the real one or the one that's my Gentile one? He looked it up and he said, are you sure? I said, yeah. He said, well, you were born on Pesach Sheni. And the whole thing came together for me, why I had that experience somewhere along the line in my past lives. I'd opted out or whatever. And this was coming back for me to an observant Jewish life. And it's ironic, the coincidence.
Right.
So I don't know how that fits in with anything, but
it's a very powerful story. It's a perfect thing of
coming back. It never happened again. My daughter she was a girl, and she always says, my daddy is chewing away, trying to have experience again. But they didn't need to come back.
Sure.
So it's interesting.
Thank you for sharing. It's definitely a very powerful story. Any other questions, comments?
Not so much a question, just
Sure, comment.
I had read the question I always had is, why was this so important? I mean, it's just another shepsel. I mean, I understand it's the Korban Pesach, but aside from that, as far as the Korbanos went, that anybody should come forward or complain. Well, I don't know if I'm going to phrase the question, but the answer I had gotten a while ago, and I don't remember from where, is the original Korban Pesach that the Jews did in Mitzrayim was the first time in human history that man ate from a korban that was being offered to a god. Until then, if you look at all the korbanos that were ever given by Noach, by Avram, by all, there were always a korban oila. We did not eat from meat that was consecrated and being given to Hashem Yisparach. The Korban Pesach was the very first time, with all the procedures and be careful and don't break the bone, is the first time in human history that mankind ate from a korban, a connection to Hashem. So I would think that in itself made it special in terms of deference as to why people should come forward. Why should I miss out? In terms of wanting to imbue some holiness from eating a korban that's being offered to Hashem, this was it. That's all.
Right. Especially that korban was really like the first korban they brought as a Jewish nation. That was really, Passover is the holiday that we became Yidden. So it's definitely very central.
All of it, right. All of this. But in terms of the connection to Hashem.
Right. You definitely see that idea that it was something very special to them. And that's why we find specifically here that
What was it they didn't want to miss out on? Why was giving the sacrifice? I'm assuming, I'm not as knowledgeable, obviously, as a lot of the people there. What is the point and the sacrifice that they didn't want to miss out on? Giving an animal to the priest, to God, to whom?
Right. So the Passover sacrifice is a sacrifice that's brought in the tabernacle, or the Holy Temple. And it's also eaten by the people that bring it. So it's not just burnt on the altar. Part of it is brought home and eaten with the matzah and the mar, the unleavened bread.
Seder. They didn't want to miss out on the Seder.
That's the meal we're talking about.
The whole ritual, the whole experience of connecting with a higher being that is imbued with prayer and eating and ritual and that whole experience.
And they didn't want to miss out.
Correct. Right. 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 So just to summarize quickly, we spoke about the story of the second Passover. That's a very central story in this week's Torah portion. And we really were discussing why did Hashem break the rules here? Why was there exceptions made over here, specifically over here? What were they thinking when they came forth, and why was the exception made? And the answer that we finally said was that really they probably weren't thinking. They were screaming, they were crying, they didn't want to miss out. They didn't come with a logical complaint, they came with a cry from within, that they didn't want to miss out. Their own initiative. Even though according to the rules, they didn't have to bring it. But since they came on their own initiative, Hashem listened to them and gave them a second chance. And that's definitely an idea that even when we seemingly miss out on something, on doing a mitzvah, if we properly want to fix it and fulfill it, so not every mitzvah we could do again. Like if someone would take, let's say, Sheikh Lulav and Esrog a week after Sukkot, that won't really work. But if we deeply regret it, then Hashem, or want to fix it, then Hashem could fill it in for us. Passover is the only one that we actually could do the action again. But the idea that it's never too late, and we always could fill in, is definitely a very powerful lesson that we learned from the second Passover. All right, everyone, have a good afternoon. And
Thank you, Rebbe.
Thank you, Rabbi.
see you next week.
Thank you,
Have a
Rabbi.
good afternoon. You're welcome.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.